Hey everyone, Joe Powell with Advanced Cardiac Resuscitation. I promised you in an earlier video that I would answer a couple of questions that we get at numerous ACR events. At the end of the event, there's a few questions that come up on a kind of regular basis, and so I wanted to just give you some answers to those quick questions. Most often asked questions is, once we get to a point where we're going to defibrillate a patient, when we have an end-tidal CO2 of over 20, remember we're not going to defibrillate a patient with an end-tidal CO2 of under 20. So once we get an end-tidal CO2 of over 20, and we've done the print, pause, start on the device, so we can look at the paper and find out if that patient is actually in a VFib or not, right? That's when we want to check. If we find that patient to be in VFib and we defibrillate them, and remember we defibrillate the lowest possible energy that would be successful. We recommend starting at 120, but depending on your device manufacturer. So then we defibrillate them. And then we start compressions again. We don't stop and check a pulse. We don't do any of that stuff, right? We start compressions again, back on the chest, and we defibrillate the patient with the mechanical CPR device running. They don't get a spike in end-tidal CO2 or a significant change in blood pressure. When would we look again to see if they're in VFib and we should shock again? And it's our recommendation that we wait about 5 minutes. We go through about 5 more minutes of the high perfusion bundle, then we do that same thing, right? Where we'll go snapshot or print, and then pause and start the device. Use the paper to determine they're still in VFib, and then we would reassess and shock that patient if they're in VFib at that time. So that's a pretty common question. How long do we wait between defibrillations if they don't gain a pulse? The other question is, if they have a really high end-tidal CO2, and we see some of those patients with high end-tidal CO2s may or may not have a change in blood pressure. If we stop and check the pulse, which we don't do every 2 minutes anymore, right? We only do that when we have a significant change in end-tidal CO2 and a significant change in blood pressure. But if we're going to stop and check, and they had a rhythm that should produce a pulse, but we don't have a pulse, or how often would we recheck? And we're not doing that check rhythm, check pulse every 2 minutes. It's again our recommendation that we would recheck in about 5 minutes. You should see that significant change in blood pressure and significant change in end-tidal CO2 should correlate with a return in spontaneous circulation. If you didn't see that, you didn't have a pulse correlated with that, we would recommend that you wait about 5 minutes, and then 5 minutes of a high perfusion bundle, and then check again. Remember to always be checking the pulse with the mechanical CPR device running first, and then pause the device, so that you have a very limited amount of time where there's a pause. If there's not a pulse, right? If there's no pulse, you can get right back on the chest, get the device running again. In a matter of seconds, when that pulse goes away, right? We don't want you to stop the device and then fish around for a pulse. A couple of answers to a couple of questions we get at the end of all ACR events. If you have any further questions, go ahead and shoot us an email. Check out our website, check out our podcast and our social media sites, and we will talk with you later. Take care. Bye.